All right, all right, all right, all right. What is going on? So we are going to be this is a free live stream for just kind of the community to come together. It's Thanksgiving week here in the U.S., and so I thought, what better way to be thankful than to just like give back. So here's the deal. This is a completely free lesson. Ask any questions you want to. If you've got a question for me that you want answered at the end of the lesson, I'll stay around and answer questions. You can email those to Steven@stevensdrumshed.com. If you're watching on Instagram, what's going on? What's going on? The link is on my profile if you guys want to come watch it full. So some people were asking about the intro music. That is West African drumming. There's a tribal group, and I believe you can find some of it. There's some really cool funeral type musical things that are happening. Their music is for a reason. So it's to celebrate someone, it's birthdays, it's weddings, it's funerals, all those things. Kind of reminds me of New Orleans in that way. So now what are we talking about? What's up, Rob? What's up, Peter? Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at halftime, and I called this grooving in halftime for a specific reason. Okay, whenever I was coming up, there was all this focus on this, right? There was all this focus on this. Or there was the focus on this. But my biggest fear in all of the world was making the transition from one to the other. Like I would break out in cold sweat because you see, I did like everybody else does. I practiced the regular grooves and then I would practice the halftime grooves. And I would never put them together how they needed to go together. So that transition always stayed rough. And so it's like I got there, but not in the smoothest fashion. So I entitled this Grooving in Halftime because I want us to look at how do we groove in halftime? How do we make it feel good? But on the flip side, how do we make that transition from regular time to halftime? And so I've got a lot of examples on the sheet music. If you check that out, that's below the lesson page. So you can check that out and look at the sheet music. I've got a lot of examples of different grooves that you can play. And what we're doing is we're working on that transition and smoothing from one to the other. So I've got like a traditional a beat on the snare. I've got a boom chick type beat. I've got a lot of just regular beats. And then I've got some fills that we're going to go through that I've found that have helped me over the years. Okay. Now let's look at this terminology first. And the terminology is there's these words. There's regular time, there's cut time, and there's halftime. When I moved to Nashville, they yelled out, I'll never forget one of my first gigs here, they yelled out, hey, we're going to cut time. And so I went to cut time, which is, to my mind, to my schooling up until then, was double time. So if we have regular 4/4 time with the backbeat on 2 and 4, 3, 4, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Cut time or double time would be putting the snares on all of the upbeats. So when I first moved to Nashville, they're like, hey, it's in cut time. And so I went to cut time. Well, what they meant was halftime. So make sure you have your terminology right with people whenever they're calling what it is. Okay, halftime is whenever it feels like it's going half as fast. Now, if we move to halftime, that's different than just playing a halftime groove. Does that make sense? So you can actually move the whole piece to halftime, where one bar officially takes up 2 bars of time. But for this example, I'm simply going to be making the groove feel like it's in halftime. And to do that, we put our backbeat essentially on 3, and it makes the beat feel like it's twice as long. It takes us twice as long to get done with that. Okay, so that's going to be kind of the explanation of what that halftime is. If you have questions as we're going through this, shoot them in. I probably won't be able to catch them on the chat board, so email them to me if you want to. So let's check this out. Let's look at this first example. The first example we have, there's a quarter note groove. Okay, so if we're in 4/4 time, 1, 2, 3, 4. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play 1 and 3 on the kick drum, 2 and 4 on the snare. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Nothing hard about that. That's why I'm doing that, okay? I want to keep it simple, what I would call bone in the nose simple. Simple, so simple it's stupid, because I need it that simple when I'm learning things. Now what we want to do is we want to move that groove to halftime. So to make that groove feel like it's twice as long, I'm going to put a kick drum on 1, and I'm going to put the snare drum on 3. And that's going to make that groove feel like it's elongated, and it takes 2 measures to get through that right now, all right? So let's check this out. So the halftime groove sounds like this. If it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right? So that's gonna, I already got people asking about the Purdy shuffle. You're gonna make me play it. I love it, I love it. That's going to be our halftime. Now what we do as drummers is we practice halftime, and we practice regular time, and halftime, and regular time, and then we get on the gig, and what are we asked to do? We're asked to go from regular time to halftime. And I know because I've crashed many a band back in the day because I didn't practice correctly. So even just as important as practicing that halftime to the regular time is it practicing that transition, what I call a door hinge. So you don't want to have squeaky door hinges going from one room to the other. So what I would do is I would play 4 measures of each. I'm going to put the click on here, and I'm going to play that groove at 90 BPM. 4 measures of regular time, then I'm going to halftime. 4, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, here we go. 3, 4, 1, 3, 4. Okay. Couple things that you notice. You notice every time I go into it, I'm very specific about what I'm hitting, and I immediately nail into that groove. So it doesn't sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, right? Some of you are laughing because you're like, that's exactly what I sound like at practice time. I know, because that's what I sounded like on the bandstand because I didn't practice this stuff. So that's what that's gonna sound like. We need to practice that transition. If throwing the crash cymbal in is too hard right now, take it out and just practice going from one groove to the other groove. What's going on, Rick? What's up, David? And so I've got someone asking about the Purdy shuffle. So let me use that as an example. It's not notated, but the Purdy shuffle is essentially a halftime shuffle, and it's based off of a shuffle pattern. So. Sped up. Whereas a regular shuffle would be this. So that's a great example of going from a normal shuffle to a halftime shuffle. We're making it feel like it's half the time. But again, the problem's not playing normal time, and it's not playing the shuffle time. The problem is playing that transition. That's the problem right there, okay? All right, let's see here. Somebody says the connection's killing you. I got good streaming from here, so I'm not sure if it'll be available for download later. I'll see. I haven't decided what's going to happen with this after this, but I'll see about maybe making that available to you. So if you're watching this on Instagram, by the way, what's up, what's up, what's up? I can't interact with you very much because mainly I can't reach my phone. Let's go to B. B is a straight 8th rock groove. It's going to be what we call like the money groove. You would see this played on Michael Jackson's, let's see, Beat It would be, I do believe it would be on there. Oh, no, excuse me. Not Beat It. Billie Jean. My fault. 1, 2, 3. All right, so 8th notes here, 1 and 3 here on the kick drum, 2 and 4 here on the snare drum. All right, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, for some of you that don't know, I go into a lot of explanation with these because we have everybody from beginners to really advanced. So that's why I go into so much explanation. Now, we're going to change this and we're going to put the kick drum on 1 and the snare drum on 3. Why do we do that? Because it makes it feel like it's twice as long. That's why we want to do that, okay? So essentially to finish that 1 kick drum, 1 snare drum, 1 kick drum, 1 snare drum in that order, it's going to take 2 measures, all right? So it's going to sound like it's twice as long. This is what that halftime groove will sound like. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. All right, now here's the problem. We know what the halftime is. We know what the full time is. We got that problem of that transition, right? A friend of mine, a good music mentor of mine actually, he used to call whenever you'd get in trouble. Like whenever you're playing and the band's doing fine and all of a sudden, it's like you're flying a plane and all of a sudden you're in the trees and you're in the trees, you gotta pull up, right? That's what it feels like to me. I always get that visualization like, we're in the trees, we gotta pull up. Not that I've ever flown a plane nor flown it into the trees, but I've flown a lot of bands into the trees. So take my advice on this. All right, let's go here. I make myself sound like I do this all the time. It's just growing up. I started gigging at a very early age, so there was a lot of learning on the bandstand. All right, let's go ahead here. 1. So I'm going to play 4 measures of the regular groove on B and 4 measures of the halftime groove. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you'll notice a couple of things. You'll notice I'm not doing any fills, not there yet. I gotta learn how to do this stuff. I'm also not doing any embellishments to the groove, and I'm counting the entire time. That's super important when you're learning halftime. You have to count, because if not, you're gonna get on the bandstand, you're gonna be like, oh no, I could just feel it, man. And you're gonna feel your way into a real bad spot with the band, because you're gonna feel it and you're gonna start dropping beats. All right, so do not just try to feel it when it comes to these transitions. You need to go ahead and make yourself count this stuff. Now, once you get it 4 measures and 4 measures, the best way to work on this is do 1 measure of each. Okay, what's going on, East Charles? What's going on, man? So what we're going to do is I'm going to play 1 measure of each. Okay, so 1 measure, and then because the thing I want to ping is that transition. So I would do this over and over. 3, 4. So that's going to be the second groove. If we look at C, this is going to be a different type of groove. We're going to add 2 8th notes to the front of this and in the middle of this. So the kick drum goes 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 3, 4. The halftime groove, my voice just cracked because I'm going through puberty apparently. It always happens at the worst times. The halftime groove is going to be 1 and, but the snare drum doesn't come until 3. So essentially the same rhythm, but the snare drum doesn't come until 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 4, and 1, 2, 4. Okay, the other way you could do that is you could put a kick drum on 1 and 2 and the snare drum on 3. And it would really feel like the whole thing had slowed down. So you could go like this. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 4. That would be an exact replica of that groove put into halftime. Okay, but it's not exactly what we're playing. So I'm going to play 4 bars of each. Let me get a click going here. How about 100 BPM? If you guys got questions, please shoot those in via the email, and I'll get to those. 1, 2, three. So that's going to be, y'all are laughing at my voice cracking now. I love it. Somebody said that's better than dropping sticks. I dropped sticks twice in the last lesson. They were like unrecoverable stick drops. One went way over there, one went way over there. I was in the middle of soloing. It was amazing. I dropped one filming a lesson the other day, and Tim, who's supposed to be my friend, sent me, he edits all my video, and he sent me a video edited with like me doing the drop and then also doing the drop in slow motion. And he really, yeah, he's that kind of friend, guys. You should get real friends. He does a great job. Okay, so let's look at D. D is what we would call, what we talked about at the front. So that would be a cut time groove. That's where the groove feels like it's going twice as fast. Okay, we would call that a boom chick beat or a country 2 beat, that type of a thing. And that's going to sound like this. The kick drum's going to be on 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 8 notes here. And then the snare drum's on all the upbeats. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 3, 4. That's going to be our groove. Now, why am I throwing all these different grooves in there? Because you will be asked to go to halftime from all different types of things. I've been asked to go to halftime from... Okay, and imagine like I used to be in big band and I would just sweat. And it was like I would see like, oh man, that transition's coming up. It's just going to murder me. And sure enough, it'd be like knife through my heart. The band would crash. You'd have to go back over it for Steven. All right, so the halftime groove, reliving some really bad moments for you guys tonight. The halftime groove is going to be 8 notes on the snare or on the hi-hat, quarter notes on the kick drum, but we're moving the snare drum instead of on all the upbeats. We're just moving it to 3. Okay, so that's going to sound like this. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4. But we're going to go into that from the double time groove. All right, so 4 measures of each. Let's do 85 BPM on this one. 1, 2, 3, 4. So somebody asked, they said, it sounds like I'm playing on the back side of the click. I've been told that my natural feel is, I won't just say that, I know my natural feel is somewhat on the back side of the click. You have certain players that have that feeling. For instance, Stuart Copeland, if you let him play naturally, is always, to me, feeling like it's on the front side of the beat. So it always feels pushing. John Bonham would be one that would be, to me, on, you know, if the click's here, just a little bit more on this side than it is pushing. And so there's different players. And so, yeah, probably naturally I am just kind of leaning back just enough into that. Okay. Now, let's go here. Good question, by the way. Somebody said, Somebody said polka time. So interesting story. I was once in a waltz and polka orchestra. If you thought you've had all of your experiences, like full orchestra, big thing. We got paid, and it was basically like a lot of gray and purple hairs that would dance out there. And the most rock and roll thing happened. They were like doing the waltz or the polka. I don't remember what it was. They were all in their tuxedos, and all of a sudden one of them hits the floor. And there's like blood everywhere, and I felt horrible. They had split their head open. And I was like, man, I was wearing like tuxedo and everything. I was like, this is the most rock and roll thing that's ever happened. Like that old person just took themselves completely out. It's pretty awesome. Okay. I haven't thought about that memory in a long time. The gig was over. We had to stop. E. Let's go to E. So E is going to be 16th notes on the snare, and there's a wrong accent in this groove. So the snare is going to be 16th notes. That's going to be 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a kick drum on 1 and 3. Accenting 2 and 4, not like it's notated. We're not accenting 3. That's a articulation that shouldn't be there. So the groove's going to be like this: 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. So that's the feel we're going for. And then I'm going to take this into a real halftime feel. This is a real common kick drum pattern that you'll find in halftime, especially in like rock halftime. So if we're playing like... So that's a real kind of common kick drum pattern to, I call that that's what I just refer to it myself as a drop beat. It feels like we like drop into this really kind of hypnotic groove. That's just what I refer to. Like if I was writing on a sheet, I'd be like drop groove. So we want to go to the halftime beat. The kick drum comes on the 1, the of 2, and the and of 3, and that's going to create what we call a hemiola. That's a 3/2 pattern. So for every 2 beats, there's 3 kick drum notes. So the pattern is going to go 1 E and a 2 and 1 E and a 2 and. Then we have the kick drum again on 4 and the and of 4. 1 E and a 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E. We have 16th notes on the snare and a backbeat on 3, not 2 and 4. So the snare goes like this: 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 4 E and a 2 E and a 4 E and a. Add the kick drum to that: 3 and a 4 E and a 1. Now, let's play 4 measures of each of them so that we can go back and forth between them. So I'll go at 95 BPM. 1, 2, 3, 4. and somebody else is asking about the Purdy shuffle again. I went over that a little bit earlier, and it's just a halftime. The Purdy shuffle, he'll demonstrate it in all types of, somebody actually referenced that. He'll demonstrate it, you can watch a video of him, he'll demonstrate it 8th notes, 16th notes, and with triplets. But the Purdy shuffle, or the halftime shuffle, really is what that would be. And so yeah, it's just swinging the 8th notes, so instead of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay, so yeah, it's basically just taking a shuffle to halftime. All right, so let's get into a little bit of funk here. This is a like funk 101. If there was that in the encyclopedia, or there's not encyclopedias anymore. When I was growing up, this is going to totally age me. We actually had people like come to our door and they're like, "Do you want to buy these encyclopedias?" And then like once a month you would get like a new encyclopedia, so you get like, "Oh, we got, C and D this month," and it's like, well, you can't look up anything in E until next month because Britannica won't send it to us. That's how I couldn't like go and type it up anyway. The things I had to go through. Okay, so we're going to have the kick drum the same as it was in the halftime before. So it's going to go 1, the of 1, and the and of 2. 1 E and a 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 and 3. But we're going to repeat that, so it's going to go 3 E and a 4 and 1 E and a 2 and 3 and a 4 and 1 E and a 2 and 3 and a 4. 2 and 4 on the snare, 8th notes on the hi-hat. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3. 1 E and a 2, excuse me, 1 E and a 2 and 3 Now, we're going to go to that same type of a halftime groove just with 8th notes. So the first 3 kick drum notes stay the same. 1, the of 1, the and of 2. Downbeat of 3 on the snare drum. The and of 4 on the kick drum. So it's going to sound like this. 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Let's put those together, 4 bars of each. So let's go at, let's do 88 BPM. 3, 4. So that's going to be that. If you're just tuning in, which some of you are, we are talking all about halftimes, a lot about the transitions, okay? A lot about the transitions. The sheet music is below the lesson, so be sure and check that out because that's kind of what I'm going for. As well, there's a ton of specials going on for the memberships. If you want to snag those are going on until midnight on Wednesday. I'm giving away a whole free course with a yearly sign-up as well as all 3 of my books. It's like almost $200 worth of stuff. So you can sign up for that. Check those out at the link above the video. Let's take this into the funk region. I want to add some ghost notes to it, okay? So the course I'm actually giving away is called Ghost Note Mastery. It's an 8-week course on ghost notes. And so let's fill in with some of these ghost notes. So between the 2 kick drums, we're going to go 1, E, and on the kick drum. Then we're going to play 2 and 4 on the snare drum, but the kick drum on the 2 is going to be on the upbeat of 2, and then there's a 16th note after that. So 2, E, and ghosted there on the snare. So it's going to go. Then we repeat those 2 beats for 3 and 4. So all together, 3 and 4 and 1. Let's check out going to halftime. I'm essentially going to fill in all the missing kick drums with my ghost notes. So the kick drum pattern is going to still be on 1, the of 1, the and of 2, but I'm filling in my ghost notes. So it's going to go like this. 1 E and 2 E and then accent the 3. 3 and 4 and 1. Excuse me. 1 E and up, 1 E and a 2 E and 4 and 1 E and a 2 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and 4 and. All right. Then at the end of that, I love it when I'm like reading something and my brain goes, and I'm like, oh, I can't read it. There's too many screens and things happening. So let's check this next part of the groove out. The next part of the groove, I'll give you an overhead shot for this. The next part of the groove, you don't need to look at my face. The next part of the groove, at the of 3, we have a ghost note. So it's going to go 2 and 3 E and So that's going to be what's happening there. Now, we got a transition between the two of these. So let's take this somewhat slow, just so you can hear what's going on. Let's do it at 70 BPM. And I'll play 4 measures of each. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now let's play that a little bit faster. Let's do this like at 100 BPM. 2, 3. Back to the halftime. Now, I started putting some things in there, and then I stopped because we haven't done that yet. Here's the deal. We've done everything except add drum fills to this. Okay, so they both feel good. We can do regular time, we can do halftime, but what about that transition feel? Fill, not feel. So the fills are real important for me in halftime because I feel like the fill helps us go there, helps us get there smoothly, okay? It's like a plane landing smoothly. It helps us get into that new time. So instead of just like, I'll give you an example. Here we go. 3, 4. Okay, it's like that was a really fast fill, or this one doesn't feel like it. To me, it feels like we just drop right into that. So I like to prep it a little bit better. So I have fills that sound like they're going to halftime in my mind, and fills that sound like they're speeding up a little bit in my mind. So they help me transition between the two. They also help me cue the band and make sure that the band knows, hey, we're going to halftime. We're about to hit that. Okay, that's not, now sometimes I'll do a fast fill going into, it's not, this is not a tried and true rule. But I find that if I can cue the band, or if you play, I know a lot of you play at church, if you can cue the congregation, because they're singing with you, and the singers and everybody else on band, if it, like for instance, if I've got a choir up there and a bunch of singers and a big band and everybody's singing with me, you better believe I'm coming with like, it's going to be so obvious we're going to halftime. Okay, because I want everybody to land there safely. So a very simple fill that'll get us to halftime is just 3 and 4 and I go down the toms. So if I'm playing, let's play F. Let's do that. 3, 4. Now, I can use that same fill to get me back there, but I like to use something a little bit more up so it goes with the subdivision that I'm going to. And so I'll use, a lot of times, 2 beats of 16th notes. These are very generic examples, but it kind of gives you the idea. So I would use something like... See how that's like a huge cue. It's very obvious what I'm doing. Okay. Another one that is number 2. If you look at number 2, that would be a transition fill that I would use going into halftime. So it's going to go 1, the and of 2, the and of 3. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 E and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 E. Okay, so let's see what that sounds like when I'm going to halftime. 3, 4. So that's how I'm getting from there to the other place. Now, number 4 would be a fill like I would use going into regular time again. And that's going to be the same rhythm on beats 1 and 2, 1 E and, 2 E and. Then on beat 3 we have 3 E and 4 E and. So if I clap that, 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and. So anytime I'm learning this stuff, I'm always thinking in the back of my head, especially if I've got a regular type of a gig, how can I help the band? How can I help the music? How can we go there smoother? I'm always thinking in those terms. I'm not thinking like, oh man, what if I could put like, you know, nobody wants that drum fill whenever you're going to halftime. Like if you're playing. I mean, imagine going in, like you're going into this soft ballady part of this song. Now, that may be called for. I'm not saying it's not called for. I'm just saying, like, don't always try to shove your chops in there. I'm thinking more along the lines of like, okay, if I do that drum fill, nobody's going to catch that that's going to halftime. As well, it's not going to feel like a transitioned there. As well, if they're lost in their music, we're not all going to get there together. You may be like, well, I shouldn't have to babysit the band. No, you shouldn't, but we do. So you got to deal with that sometimes. And it all depends on the caliber of player I'm playing with. Sometimes I know like they got where I am. And sometimes I can tell by like how they're looking nervously around the stage. Ever see a squirrel that like hears a sound? They're like looking around. I know they're lost, and I'm like, okay, we're not going to get there together. So it's all those split-second decisions that happen that you really need to pay attention to and have some things. I know that this is always going to work. 100% of the time, it's going to work, okay? And so the same thing if you're going from like if you're playing a samba. So it's the same type of deal. I have all of these fills that will go with these, with all of these different things. Somebody says, fills are for thrills, but groove pays the bills. It's so true. It's so true. We just got back from PASIC. I don't want to get off topic. If you got questions, shoot those in to steven@stevensdrumshed.com. If you're on Instagram still hanging out with us, I totally can't see your questions. Sorry. Last time I turned the phone around, and the whole drum set got turned around because of some glitch on Instagram. So I was like, I would rather you have a front-facing view of this guy right here. No, if you got questions, shoot those in, steven@stevensdrumshed.com. Yeah, so we listened to, Tim and I went to PASIC, and I talked about Tim earlier. Tim and I work together. He does all the video editing, the sheet music, all that stuff. And so we went to 3 different clinics. We were talking about it on the way back. And 3 of the players said they had lost gigs because they were too chops driven. This goes back to John Blackwell, talks about how he lost a gig because he was too flashy with the stick twirls. It was on a gig that it wasn't. I think it was, I don't remember what gig it was. Cameo, maybe? I forget what gig it was. I don't want to put words in his mouth. But they've lost those gigs from being too busy. Okay? You will lose the gig. There are times for that, and I am so into that. If you're on a gig where you can do that in a stretch, that's like it's a dream, man. I love it when that happens. But a lot of times we're not, and a lot of times when you have to fit those things in there. So just have the maturity to understand when meat and potatoes are called for, and then when you can stretch out a little bit and have some fun. That's always good. So let me get to some questions. Let's see. We got. I know we got one question. If anybody else has got a question, that's Steven@Stevensdrumshed. Have you been in a position where halftime was called out in a tune with an odd time signature? Is 5, 4, 7, 8? If so, how do you go about transitioning into something like that, and what kind of grooves might you go into? Yeah, so in odd time signatures, halftime, it would be a tough one to go through, and that would be on a per song basis. So they wouldn't just. You wouldn't be in like 7/8 or 11/16 or 7/4 or 5/4 and then turn around and be like, we're going to halftime, because that doesn't make any sense. Half of what? Half of 5 is 2.5. So we can do that, but because a 5, like a 4/4 groove is essentially, if we're looking westernized music, it's 1, 2, 3. There's no set 5/4 groove. It's just different whenever people play, unless they play like the standard 4/4 with one beat stuck on the end. 1, 2, 3. 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. I always think it's not a bad way to play it if it's called for, but it's always like that last beat. You're like, are we to the next measure yet? Oh, there we go. That 5's just kind of like stuck on the end there. So it's harder there because there's no standardized 5/4 groove, and as well, there's no way to split the uneven number into halves. It's hard to do unless we start using the quivers, like the 8th notes or the 16th notes. So that would be on a per. It's a great question, but that would be on a per situation basis that I would do that. That would be something you would plan. You wouldn't call like, hey, we're in 11/16, go to halftime. It's like, no, playing a Chick Corea tune, and that would need to be planned out. Good question, Andrew. Andrew's got another one. Have you been asked to jump to halftime in New Orleans jazz type of tune? What might that look like? No, because New Orleans, New Orleans jazz, like a second line tune. That's how I would take that to halftime. So if this was our regular time, so that's how I would go to halftime. I would make it a true kind of like a kind of a drop beat type of a halftime. That's a good question. John's got a question. Can you give some examples of recorded rock blues songs that use regular time halftime as a composition tool? That is a good question, and that is somebody referenced Chick Corea again. Spain just about like drove me nuts when I was coming up. That's not an odd time, but it just reminds me every time I hear Chick Corea, it's like Spain. They use rock and blues songs that use regular time and halftime as composition tools. You've got a lot of Zeppelin did it quite often. What song is that? They go from a parade type of a feel into that, and then they start blowing that whistle, and they go into this more of a street type of a beat. And so that would be one song that we could point to right off the top of my head. I can't recall going from halftime to full time. I should have looked up some examples of that before I started the lesson. That is a good question though. So yeah, anyway, somebody's talking about New Orleans stuff. Yeah, so I was in New Orleans in the rain. Thank you, Brent. Is that Full in the Rain? Yeah, that's Full in the Rain. It's just a great tune. That came on the radio the other day, and I was like, oh, it's so good. It's so good. Yeah, Full in the Rain does that. And it mixes going back and forth. It's really cool to see how Bonham mixes that and does that. Somebody talks about New Orleans stuff. Yeah, so I lived in New Orleans for 3 years. I'm talking more about that these days. Tim reminded me, hey man, nobody knows that you played anywhere. They just have seen you online. I'm like, oh yeah. Most of my life has been spent playing, not doing this. This is the new thing in my life, like in the last few years. Most of it is spent doing that. Yeah, so I spent a long time playing in New Orleans and learning how to play that in the cracks feel, that feel that's not quite so. It's not an all the way. It's not a a strictly shuffled pattern. It's more like in the swamp, kind of you got dirty and thrown over in the gutter, and it's like beer going over you and all the stuff you'd see on Bourbon Street. It's like, that's the feel we want to go for. So yeah, I played that for years and years and years. Wayward Son by Kansas, that's great. Y'all keep putting those in there. So yeah, that's going to be kind of about groove. I want to give a couple minutes if you have any more questions. Steven@stevensdrumshed.com. You can shoot those in there, and I'll get to those. I also wanted to say the course I'm giving away right now with the yearly membership is Ghost Note Mastery. So if you're looking to work on ghost notes, that's a $130 course that's completely free, as well as you get all 3 of my books. So the quarterly membership gets the Functioning in Time book, which is $20 value. The 6 months gets all 3 of my books, which is a $60 value, and the yearly gets all 3 of my books, $60, and the Ghost Note Mastery. That's an 8-week course, so it's a really in-depth course that I give. It's got like, I think 16 videos that go with it and tons of sheet music. It's a really in-depth course on ghost notes. So if you're needing work on that, this is the chance to get that for free. The link is just on this. Andrew says he just emailed one. Yes, I just got it. Let's see here. Do you have a go-to groove for a double-time shout section of a tune, like Shout by the Isley Brothers? Yeah, man. You know, every time I go to something like that, I play a groove like this. So I came up from a punk rock background, and so that's like my teenage years slowed down. Is what that groove is. That would be the go-to. Another one would be Jet. Are you gonna be my girl? That's another half-time, or that's another double-time groove. You know, it really has to do with the song. American Girl is another double-time groove. Does that one go into? No, that one doesn't go. Yeah, it does. So American Girl, thank you for reminding me of that. So American Girl's a... That goes into a halftime type of a feel, except they put the snare drum on 4. That's a great example of a popular song that goes into a halftime type feel with the snare drum put on 4. So let's see here. Somebody says, could you talk about punk cut time? Yeah, so I talked at the beginning about cut time. Instagram, you guys still with us? Just give me a hand clap. No, I can't hear you because it's on my phone. I can't hear you. I can't see you. It's like, you know, it's like the worst relationship ever, guys. Just give me the hearts like on the side. Make the hearts go like flutter up. I like it for some reason. I'll watch live streams just so I can see that happen. I'll go, oh, look at that. I'm entertained really easily. It's really easy to entertain me. So punk cut time. Yeah, it's there's a difference between halftime. Okay, Rob's asking something. These are all good questions. Cut time is what I just played, whereas in Nashville, sometimes in bigger cities you're dealing with players that are very schooled, and sometimes you are dealing with players that are what I would call street schooled, and that means they didn't go to school, they didn't learn what the proper definition of halftime is, or cut time, or regular time, and so they're just calling it what whoever taught them it called it. And so cut time in punk is just that. It's twice as fast, or it's got that cut time feel. So if we're, let's see here. Damn It would be a song by Blink-182. So da 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 da. warm up before I do that. If I was going into cut time from that instead of, right, we would go into, instead of, okay, so it's a difference between the two of them. That's all it means. Rob is asking a good question. Let's see here. Rob, why would a band member just shout out to go to cut time in the middle of a song? Seems odd to me. It does, especially when they yell out cut time and they mean halftime. That's really super odd. The reason they do that is because I was sitting in on the gig, and so they were yelling audibles to me. So it was a part of the song that was going to cut time, or to halftime, not cut time. And so he was calling an audible to me. He just leaned back and said, you know, cut time, and to which I, you know, we're supposed to, and I'm like, it's supposed to be, so we went to this ballad section, and instead the drummer's playing in double time. It was bad. The other, you want to hear another embarrassing time, was whenever I played, late in the evening goes, but originally he played it with actually 4 sticks, 2 sticks over here and 2 sticks in his left hand. That's the rhythm, and it's like a modified Mozambique, and that Steve Gadd played, and they called that. They're like, "Do you know it?" And I'm like, "No, I don't know that." They're like, "Oh, you'll get through it." So I'm supposed to be playing that. Do you know? You know, I was supposed to be going. And I'm playing. Forget about it. Forget about it. That was one of my horrible things. Rob says, but you didn't know the song was going to do that. No, a lot of times on a sub gig, they'll say, do you know this song? And I'll say no. And they'll say, okay, we're going to play it anyway. And so at that point, that's whenever these become super important. When I moved to Nashville, I had a problem with hearing, because country goes to, it has certain layouts, and I'd never really played country, and so some of the 2 bars and things like that I was missing. But yeah, I didn't know the song, and they just called halftime or cut time, and it was the wrong call on their part. So awesome. Somebody asked a good question. How do you as a band leader communicate changes to a band you're leading? So if you're on the gig, I find the best way is to yell. As odd as that may seem. So when you're in a high pressure environment, I posted, if you go to the YouTube channel, go to my channel and look up awards, just look up awards, and there will come up a Nashville awards ceremony that I played at the Wild Horse Saloon. We're talking about, it's triple, I think there's 3 decks. Is there 3 or 2 decks? Dance floors and stuff here. It's a huge venue. I got a band that I met when I got there. We're not rehearsing with the songs. We're playing with 8 different artists, 2 or 3 songs per artist, and we get about 15 seconds of each song to sound check them. That's it. At that point, that's whenever I start yelling a lot, because if I don't, nobody's going to stay together. Okay, and so I did that during rehearsal, and the keyboard player, they were all on big touring gigs. The keyboard player started laughing. He's like, "I guess I know who's driving the boat here," and that was like a compliment. He's like, "I appreciate you doing that because otherwise we're going to fall apart." So if you can get their attention and mouth it to them. If you can't, then you're going to have to yell it to them. If you're in a situation where you have to talk a lot to the band, have the sound man, and you all have ears, have the sound man run you a talkback mic, and the talkback mic just goes to the band, so you can actually just talk like I'm talking. They hear it in there, and you can be like, "Okay, we're coming up to the verse here. We need to, go to halftime." You go to the halftime. They'll walk you through the chart. The other way is we used to communicate with the band. We used to have drum fills. If you're in a band, it's a really good idea to smooth out your transitions. The thing that's there's some things that will separate you from bands that just sound okay and bands that you walk in and you're like, "Oh wow, they've got things together." And part of that's your show, and part of that show is the transition elements. And so the transition from one song to the other, so you don't stop, there's dead air, The energy goes, and then all of a sudden you start back up. And so what we would have is we had different cues for different songs. So the cue that I cued Soul Man with, because I would call audibles on the stage, you had to know how to rotate the room. Certain songs would make people dance, certain songs would make the dancers leave the dance floors and go grab drinks, and then the slow dancers would come out. So for instance, we used to hit them with, a combination we used to hit them with was My Girl, to clear out the party dancers. The couples would come out there, they'd rotate to the bar, and then we would call something like funky music or brick house, and that would get them back out there. If we want to completely clear the club, we could play something like the 1 o'clock jump or something like that. And occasionally they wanted us to clear the club so that they could rotate it back again. So you can actually control a dance floor with what you play. It's kind of interesting, the psychology there. But we used to have drum fills that we came up with, and forever and ever, this will always mean, anytime a drummer does this, that we're going into Soul Man. That simple fill, black badoom, that meant Soul Man. Of course, Brick House is a very obvious one. Now, why do we have these? Because the horn players were up there and the rest of the band. That meant you had 2 beats to get your act together, and then we're into the song. Celebration, always and forever, okay? So I would say celebration, 1, 2. And even if they didn't hear me say celebration, they would hear that drum fill and go, oh, okay, we're going to celebration. And then they would get ready. Or I would say, Soul Man, 3, 4, black, kadoom, doo-zoo. And they would know to come in just like that. So a lot of times you can work out transitions into different songs by having a drum fill that you cue everybody with. And you just say, I'm going to play this drum fill, and that means we're starting this song. And have everybody memorize those drum fills. We had several of those that we did that with. So that's a great question. Let's see here. Somebody says selling drinks, what you were there to do. Yeah, not everybody gets that. They think it's like about the band, and it's not actually about the band. The club, if they don't make any money, your band doesn't get hired again. And so if it's a restaurant, they want to sell food. If it's a club, they want to sell drinks. They want people to have a good time. You know, that's your job. You're bringing the party, and you can do that within the confines of whatever you want to. But there's a big psychology about learning what songs will get people on the dance floor, what songs will rotate so that you have couples out there, what songs will absolutely clear the club. And the doorman, it was very interesting. The doorman on Bourbon Street would sometimes come in, and he would tell me what to call. He would say, you know, call, Vehicle by Ides of March. And I would call that, and he would fill the club up. I don't know how he did it, but it was like his song. Like he could just jam to that. So the psychology in that is pretty deep. So